Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
And welcome back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. We are about halfway through the offseason program as we record this on a Tuesday morning. I believe next week, Chris, will be our first glimpse at the Colts in a media viewing session. Rookie minicamp, obviously, this past weekend, but OTAs begin next week. And for vets, I think it's 2 weeks of OTAs. Minicamp mandatory June 7th through the 9th, or whatever that Tuesday through Thursday is. And then the vets will leave. The rookies and the young guys will stay for one more week, and that's it. Obviously, the schedule announced. We'll unpack that on this podcast. Probably looking at a late July start to training camp based off where the first preseason game is for the Colts. Some joint practice news to touch on as well. I want to share some tidbits we learned in the Chris Ballard annual film session. So should be fun podcast. And as always, we'll do Twitter questions. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. And since this is a podcast and we don't have a visual as of yet, which could potentially come down the line.
Yeah.
I want to touch on, obviously, the month of May in Indiana is huge because of the race. You guys will be covering that on your morning show all month. But as I look across, you have a 1967 Pacers hat on. Who is the autograph on that hat?
Well, so I got this from doing the bowling thing earlier this year. Did you see video of that? Happened to see when they put me on the little saucer and Boomer just fired me into the pins, and let's just say that went a lot better than the old knockout for Kevin a few half times later. I believe it's Sabonis.
Okay.
On the hat. I really like the hat.
The hat's awesome.
And older me, I probably just, the autograph, I don't know, maybe that sounds bad. It doesn't mean that much. The lottery's tonight, and Sabonis is representing the Kings. So it is kind of weird how that all has turned out. But, yeah, I got that on. I got my Greg Oden T-shirt on.
I was going to say Greg Oden, who's now with the Butler Bulldogs.
Yeah, director of basketball ops. I think I got this at Edinburgh Outlet Mall. You ever shop there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great
That
stuff.
Nike outlet is the place to go if you are in central Indiana.
That's where I got it, here, the Nike swoosh. So
shout
out to Greg Oden. I kind of have a creepy stalkerish story on my end, me doing the stalking of Greg Oden. I probably won't share it here on the podcast. We might save that for a summer one, though. But, yeah, I think I was in 8th grade. So I think you're still allowed to do that in 8th grade, but I'm sure there's a cutoff point that, it gets a little dangerous there. But Greg and Mike Conley were both very, very friendly when I met them, and now I'm thinking to myself, God, I'm like 2 years apart from them. That is really weird that I did that. But
no, I get it. I was the same way. After a Lawrence North game, I went down to it was the fact that Greg Oden and Mike Conley, and shout out to Kiefer, who just announced his retirement.
Jack Kiefer, Captain Jack.
The fact that you could go down, I had a T-shirt because they were going for a three-peat, and I bought a T-shirt at the game, went down, they both autographed it. At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, I got Greg Oden's autograph.
Yeah.
Looking back now, it's kind of funny to think Mike Conley's autograph is probably more.
Conley's worth a whole lot of money there.
But yeah, just wanted to let the listeners in a little bit on the attire that Kevin's going through right now and how Indiana centric he is.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out tonight. Let's begin with kind of the big nightly news item from last week, and that was the NFL schedule release on Thursday. We'll kind of unpack it, maybe just kind of go down the schedule in general. I don't know, break it up into quarters, if you will. But what stood out to me, just in chronological order, it's wild to think that you start this year's schedule with 2 road games versus 2 home games last year, and yet I sit here and think, what a much easier schedule to start the season than you had last year. Davis Mills and Trevor Lawrence, a little bit different than Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford.
Correct.
So if you were going to list me like the 17 games last Thursday morning, say, pick 2 of the easiest on here. These 2 games, albeit on the road, would have been in the top 5 or 6 of games you would want to see early on. So golden opportunity, Chris, to take care of the Week 1 drought and take care of the Jacksonville drought. I don't believe in curses. I don't believe in jinxes. I don't believe in any of that bullshit. You just go out there and you play football and you win the game. So those are my thoughts on, people are like, hey, don't talk about the weather for the Indy 500. I mean, screw it,
Yeah.
Let's go.
So we certainly hope that we win the first 2, and I think it's pretty pivotal to win the first 2.
I would agree. I would agree on that because the next three, is it the toughest 3-game stretch of the year? You could certainly make the argument that it is. I also think something on the first two before we get into Kansas City, Tennessee, and Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Just like play from ahead. You know, when's the last time the Colts have gotten off to a nice start within the division, overall record, all of those things?
Right.
I just think that would do wonders to this football team just with your psyche and all of that. And obviously would alleviate some of the pressure with, like you said, Kansas City. I don't have it in front of me. Is it Kansas City and then it's at Tennessee and
we're home with Kansas City, home with Tennessee, and then at Denver
on the short week?
Yes.
Do you worry about altitude on that short week? Playing in those elements?
I mean, I worry about playing the NFL any week, but
Touché.
I mean, on a short week, yes, I have heard other players on different podcasts and different radio shows and stuff say that it is a little bit different in Denver, but
I don't know.
At the same time, you strap it up and you go out there and you play.
Yeah,
so if your scheme, your scheme will outperform altitude. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I just wonder, short week, I don't know, I probably have to look at, like, how has Denver performed on Thursday Night Football at home, you know, in their history as a franchise. The Titans game in Week 4 in Indy.
And they still, Denver, sorry to cut you off.
No.
They'll still be learning each other as well.
Certainly.
New quarterback, new receivers. I mean, it's not like they might be hitting their stride at that point in the season either.
You know, I think one thing to note is you've got some different coaching staffs early on. Obviously, Week 1 and Week 2, different coaching staffs. Denver, a different coaching staff. Mahomes getting used to life without Tyreek Hill. You know, for Tennessee in Week 4, their previous 2 games, at Buffalo and then Vegas. So they're going to come in here, you know, facing 2 pretty good teams. Now, you're going to see Tennessee again in Week 7. And obviously, this divisional slate. You see all 3 divisional teams in the first 4 weeks. 5 of your first 7 against the AFC South. Tennessee has a bye before that Week 7 game against Indy. So that is something I think to note as well. I don't get why the NFL does this. Just front loads with all these divisional games. The Colts had it last year too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, put one of these Tennessee games in December. I think back to the later luck years. Like, you always had that marquee December game.
It matters more.
With Houston
yeah.
at the time. Like, I'm tired of seeing Jacksonville and Houston in Week 18 for the Colts. The Commanders, Mr. Wentz at 425.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 425 start. What do you think? 4:33 start for the 8-minute tribute video?
Yeah. I'm sure
earlier, or you think 8 minutes is pretty good?
I'm sure the tribute's going to be a very long one for him.
You know, Mr. Irsay, Coach Irsay is what I like to call him. Coach Irsay, you know, he's been active on the plane. You could maybe splice all those together, maybe get Myra to you know, have an appearance. I believe she showed up in a couple videos ago. A little singing as well to Carson.
Oh, gosh, probably maybe a Bible verse or two.
Maybe a Bible verse or two. I know Carson is not this type, but if I were Carson Wentz and I led my team to victory, I would walk off the field and I would go double birds right at the owner's box.
You should do like the Baker Mayfield in college where he just plants the flag in the middle
Boom.
of
Yeah, I don't know if the Commanders already have a flag made for their new nickname or what, but that's exactly what I would do. You know, the other stretch that stands out to me, and calling this a stretch is, you know, when I hear stretch, I think of like 3 to 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, look at Week 9 through 16, which, again, is not a stretch. It's a long. Eagles, Steelers, at Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. We should mention Steelers is Monday night. Your bye week, latest bye in the NFL for the second straight year. At Vikings, Chargers. Chargers being Monday Night Football as well.
Right.
So, and you could probably go before that. Is before that Raiders?
So, yeah, you said Week 9. That's Week 11. But yeah,
Week
so
9, is that New England?
Week 9 is, so it's New England, Raiders, Eagles, Steelers, and then goes through what you just mentioned. Yeah.
And it's at Patriots and at Raiders, right? I mean, holy shnikes. So think about that. At Patriots, at Raiders, and correct me if I'm wrong, I should probably just pull up the schedule.
No, you're fine.
Eagles,
Yep.
Steelers on Monday night,
Mm-hmm.
Cowboys, they have a longer week, Cowboys, because they have Thanksgiving before that.
Right.
Well, we all have Thanksgiving, but you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah.
They're going to play the game. At Cowboys, of course, Sunday Night Football. The bye week at Vikings, Chargers. That is, you know, 5 playoff teams from last year, and I would say The Vikings just always lurk, and the Chargers certainly, I think, are knocking on the door. That's quite a 2-month gauntlet.
We're going to need that bye week on 14.
It might not be like I don't see a top 5 NFL team in that group, but I see a lot of teams kind of similar to the Colts, honestly. So I think that is kind of a interesting little 2-month span. And, of course, this is because you play 5 of your 6 divisional games in the first 7 weeks and don't play another divisional game until week 18.
And then based on the schedule, depending on what Mr. Goodell wants to do, that Vikings game is to be determined because it could be flexed to a Saturday or Sunday.
Right. Colts were flexed to Saturday last year with New England.
Right. And then later, the last game of the year can also be flexed, and that's against the Texans, which hopefully we are not limping into a playoff.
That's 1 o'clock. Spiro Ditas on the call. That's one. Him and Archuleta, 1 o'clock. That's what that is. 2 home Monday night games. You guys have heard me talk about it endlessly. Jim Irsay should be irate at the NFL. It's an absolute crime and a joke. The Colts have not been home on Sunday or Monday night since 2015, since the infamous fake punt game. Just to reiterate, every team in the NFL, Chris, has had at least 3 home Sunday or Monday night games in that span. The Colts have had 0, and Jacksonville's had 0. When you're in the same company of exposure as Jacksonville, yes, exposure could be taken a lot of ways with their old coach, but you know what I mean. Television exposure, not necessarily hands going places that should probably be safe for behind a closed door. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke.
You got to be pounding your fist at the owners' meetings, right?
Yeah, and Irsay's been vocal, and I agree with him. There's stuff I don't necessarily agree with him on, but I could not agree with him more on this. You think a couple of Manning cast games, Steelers, Chargers, being the Monday Nighters?
I like those. So last year they didn't do a full season. They took some games off. Hopefully this year.
And they bailed on the old Raiders.
Yeah, and this year
or Ravens.
Yeah. This year, I hope that they get a full slate because I honestly do.
Announced just 10.
Okay.
Again, I could be wrong on that.
No, you might be. I mean, you might be correct. I hope they keep those up because I honestly, not to take anything away from ESPN, I enjoy watching that over the main coverage.
Now this year, the main coverage is a little different.
It is a little different, and then also
you got Buck and Aikman, which I'm a bigger fan than most. I think with that crew there. The only weather worry. At the Giants on New Year's Day. Now, you can make a nice trip out of that. You want to do New Year's Eve in Times Square, start ordering the diapers now to stand out there and watch that, and then slide over to MetLife for the game New Year's Day. Other things that kind of stood out to me, the AFC West is spread out. Remember, Gus Bradley comes from the AFC West.
Right.
Does that help you out there? The preseason schedule, it'll be at Buffalo. These are all Saturdays in August. At Buffalo the 13th, Detroit the 20th, Tampa Bay the 27th. Those last 2 games, Detroit and Tampa, will be at home. Joint practices with the Lions. So Dan Campbell and the Fighting Kneecaps will come to Grand Park. You kind of forget Dan Campbell was interviewed for the head coaching job here after Josh McDaniels left you at the altar. It was Leslie Frazier, Dan Campbell, and Frank Reich.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the content that you get if you're able to interview or be a part of. Are you able to interview the opposing coach?
During the joint practice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I asked.
I mean, he's a soundbite, a walking soundbite.
He is, and I think I hate to look forward to one-on-one matchups too much, but Aiden Hutchinson against Bernard Ryman, it's what you want. You certainly want to see that. We'll get into this with Ryman here in just a second, but I told Matt Taylor to do this homework because he has access to much more passwords and logins than I do. Find me the last time a non-first-round pick started at left tackle as a rookie. I would be willing to bet it's quite some time. And also find me it injury-related, non-injury-related as well. So, yeah, I just think that's a big part of this offseason, besides a new quarterback, obviously a new defensive system as well. So, again, some schedule thoughts on that. Anything else before we move on to the Ballard film session?
No, I thought it was a little bit different. I was talking to one of our engineers who typically travels to the games. He was mentioning, the whole preseason. He's like, yeah, it's a little different that all the games are on Saturday this year, but I think we're just going to see a certain standard of scheduling as we move forward here in the next couple of seasons.
So, again, 6 takeaways on the Colts schedule. You can find that on 1075thefan.com. On Friday, Chris Ballard had his annual film session. It was a little shorter than he's done it in years past with rookie minicamp starting, but we pretty much saw the first 4 picks. Nick Cross was kind of a short bit, but Alec Pierce, Bernard Ryman, and Jelani Woods. Flip Woods and Ryman around in order, but let's start with Pierce.
Absolutely.
Ballard initially shows IU film, a game that Ballard was at. He tries to get to an IU game a year. And Ballard's big thing is, to his scouts, tell me what they can do. Tell me if that can fit into our equation.
Mm-hmm.
Play-to-player strengths. Sure, you want to develop some, but, what do they do well, and can we make that work? With Alec Pierce and Jelani Woods, Ballard felt like there was a lot of route tree stuff involved there, shallows, sails, over routes that the Colts do. So I think that was attractive to him. Loves the body control of Pierce, loves the hands. Ballard was pretty adamant that he didn't see stiff on film with Pierce. It's kind of been a common negative on him. A little bit stiff in the lower body. Can he run a full route tree? Ballard didn't see that. He mentioned that beating press coverage needs work. I go back to Deion Kane when he tore his ACL in 2018. That was the thing that Deion Kane was doing so well in Frank Reich's eyes. 2018, 2019, I forget when Kane tore his ACL, but for a rookie, he was beating press coverage on a pretty routine basis, and that's really difficult to do there. So, Ballard is a big fan. I think he would have had him slotted a lot higher in these wideout tiers if you would have looked. I think you'd be surprised to hear Ballard probably had Alec Pierce over a wideout that was taken very early in the draft. The Alabama game was interesting. He mentioned something, and I felt this watching the game. Certainly the first drive, Pierce had an opportunity to make a play, and Ritter overthrew him. Basically, Ballard said he had points in the game where he was wearing Alabama out, and they're just not getting him the ball. So you look at that game, I think he had 2 catches for 18 yards, 17 yards. That's not going to impress you. But if you look at the film, there are opportunities for Cincinnati to make a play with Pierce.
Right.
And they just couldn't get him the ball. So, by all accounts, a strong rookie minicamp for Pierce, and, as he should. The Colts didn't draft the corner to the 7th round, and Pittsburgh State or somewhere else was their undrafted corner, and a kid from Germany, playing in the secondary. So you would expect that. But yeah, those were pretty much the IU touchdown he showed. It's a game-winning touchdown, the eventual game winner.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets pressed, but he does a nice job of not getting pressed and gobbled up. Ballard's pretty much saying sometimes you see wideouts that get pressed and they get jammed and they get pushed towards the sideline, almost out of bounds, and they're done.
Right.
Pierce was able to stay in play enough where Ritter could throw him the ball kind of outside the numbers and make that play. And for IU fans or fans that watch that game, they will remember that touchdown. It was just a beautiful ball by Ritter, and Pierce, he's just such a natural, gifted jumper, high point the ball, find the ball, and come down with it.
Yeah.
It's a rare trait. It's why he probably has so much volleyball background that he does, but he's extremely impressive at that. So, yeah. That was Alec Pierce.
And if you watch the Colts Twitter account and YouTube series, you'll know that then tight end Jelani Woods, Frank Reich, and Chris Ballard were happy to get. Those were the 2 names that they wanted. They got both. What did Ballard say about Jelani Woods?
Yeah, loves him. I think it's his favorite pick. He went to the Pittsburgh, Virginia game this year, I would assume, to see Kenny Pickett. That was en route to going to Colts Buffalo that Sunday, so he drove out there. And just his first thought was, Mike DeReese and Morocco Brown, a couple of the Colts scouts, told him about Jelani Woods and Ballard. I go back to something I think I mentioned on last week's podcast. When Ballard sat down with Frank Reich, when Reich took the job in 2018, the guy he talked about the most was Mo Alley Cox on the roster. There's something about these big tight ends that Ballard loves. So he was going to love Woods, given his frame. I think what took it to the next level was East-West Shrine game. Marcus Brady as Jelani Woods' head coach at that game. Clayton Adams, who's the Colts tight ends coach, is the offensive coordinator for Jelani Woods, and they felt like he was super coachable. Super coachable. And I just think they feel like he's a little bit more of a fluid runner than Allie Cox. Just a little bit more of a natural athlete. Granted, he's been playing football for longer, so that shouldn't surprise too many people there. So, yeah, they, again, are very, very high on him. They think he's extremely intelligent. And there was a comparison a little bit, too, I think, of we've talked about this, how I've come around so much, and I know some people make fun of it. I get Ballard's understanding with wanting to bet on the high character guys. You don't need to have 53 choir boys, but the thought process is with the higher characters, they have a easier chance, better chance to achieve their floor. They're going to work to their floor. Now, can you get to the ceiling? That remains the question, but you know full well they're going to get to their floor.
Yeah.
There's not as much of a bust potential with them. I could probably name some Ryan Grigson draft picks that would fall into that area, and you don't need me to tell you them. So I think that is the line of thinking. When I watch Woods, though, I will say this, Chris. I don't see a lot of, 3rd and 5, put your foot in the ground, super timing, precision route running. I think the Colts realize he's probably not going to be a Jack Doyle type of just consistent, dependable guy in that part of the field. So I do think that'll be something to keep an eye on. But there was one point where he's just showing clips of just Jelani Woods throwing dudes out of the club. I mean
6'7", 253.
Yeah,
you're a man.
I don't blame these DBs. I felt bad for him. Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, and he's just sitting there with his clicker being like, you can see why I sweated this out.
Uh-huh.
And, again, yards after catch, you can do it in a lot of ways. I don't feel like the Colts have tapped into that enough. Some of that is quarterback-related, certainly, but Woods can help you out with that.
Yeah, and in a league where it's a lot of speed, sometimes it's nice to have a man over the middle that can just, like you said, throw you out of the club.
Yeah, man, M-A-N, all caps, man. And lastly on Woods, Chris, I do want to see him catch the football. How natural is it? Is there some double catching?
Right.
There's a reason he fell to the 3rd round. He's not a perfect prospect. I don't think blocking is too much of a concern. I think he did that a lot at Oklahoma State, to be honest with you. But that is something that I think we just need to keep an eye on.
All right, as we talked about earlier, let's get to offensive tackle.
Mr. Ryman?
Mr. Ryman, what are your thoughts? What was, or not? I mean, you will give me your thoughts, but what was Ballard's thoughts on Ryman?
Have we put the Ryman interview in one of these podcasts? We should do that if we haven't already.
We've not. We should.
I know we did the Fickle one.
I know we did Fickle.
Yeah.
I know he was happy to be a Colt. He said this is where he wanted to come. Now, naturally, a lot of players say that when they get drafted somewhere, but I truly felt like he was being genuine when he said he wanted to be a Colt.
I haven't come across a ton of foreign NFL players, but in my time covering the league for, I guess now about a decade or about a dozen years, I just think the foreign players realize how great of a gift and how great of an opportunity they have because the game is so, gosh, I'm so bad with words. I'm going to say foreign again. It's so foreign to them overseas.
Right.
They're not used to this. The opportunities are not as endless in the game of American football as they are seemingly here in the States. The Ryman one, he showed very little game film. A little bit of LSU, which I think was a big kind of all right, he can do it against this competition.
Right. He
really just showed a workout. It was the positional drills at the Western or Central Michigan Pro Day. They had another guy go early. I forget who took him, but they had another guy go. But basically, Ballard watched that workout, and from I'm not describing it in the best way possible, but think very high-intensity yoga type of stretching and flexibility and core strength and how much power, lunging type moves, those things. Basically, he saw some similar O-line freakiness to what he saw in the Braden Smith workout back at Auburn. At one point, he's doing these couple lunges in a row. I mean, he looks like a bunny rabbit, just hopping around. And I say that because Rosie loves to hop like a bunny rabbit. Except he's 6'6" and 307, something like that. Ballard felt like arm length, age, only played left tackle for 2 years, probably reasons why he fell there. But again, the Colts feel like short arms can be made up for if you have elite footwork.
Right.
And they feel like that's where Ryman can kind of offset some things. Now, I'll go back to what I said earlier, Chris. There's a reason why he fell. And there's a reason why we haven't seen guys enter the league in year one, especially someone that only started for 2 years at a max school at left tackle, and become immediate starter. So I think that is a question that you have there. Is it going to be Matt Pryor? Is it going to be Ryman? Does the loser of that have a chance to play right guard? Is Danny Pinter still in line there? All of those things. I think it's kind of 3 guys for 2 spots is how I look at left tackle and right guard. Obviously, Pinter's not a candidate at left tackle, but I think the other 2, Pryor probably more so than Ryman, could be a candidate at right guard.
So I heard the 4th one that we're going to get to and the last one for the Ballard updates, Nick Cross apparently asked for the playbook like day one. Let me see it. And I know the Colts were super stoked to go get this guy.
Yeah, I know Ron Milas, their defensive backs coach, really liked him. Big fan of Cross, and again, actions speak louder than words, guys. Ballard has never done anything like this in 6 drafts, trading a future 3rd-round pick to get a player that's not at a position of immediate need.
Right.
Now, again, wake-up call to Kari Willis and Julian Blackman, but we didn't get to see a lot of stuff from Cross, but we certainly saw some run and hit ability. I think Ballard's quote was he has some real stuff about him. Yeah, I think, honestly, Woods and Cross are the guys that Ballard is just super, super intrigued by. And I do think there's an element, Chris, of, again, Gus Bradley's involvement. How do we see body types? How do we see skill sets turn over the next couple of years? It's not going from, who was the last defensive coordinator here? Ted Monachino? I'm trying to think who the last Chuck defensive coordinator was. It's not going from a 3-4 to a 4-3, but there are some changes there.
Absolutely. That
are definitely going to be different than what you had in the previous regime. I always liked Monachino. He was a nice guy. Yeah, it was him.
Seemed like a great guy.
Is he in college now?
I don't know where he's at.
Atlanta Falcons.
Okay.
Went back to Missouri for a year. Yeah, good dude. So, yeah. Those are the 4 picks. Again, that's up kind of in article form up on our website as well. But always enjoy that. Chris, very grateful for the time he gives us. Just nice to get a little bit more of a clear picture on the reasoning behind it and see why. All 4 of them were ranked in the 2nd round. I believe that's what Ballard said as well. So I think would have been comfortable taking all of them at some point in round 2. And I think that's why you saw the emotions on the With the Next Pick series and all of that of why they were so giddy.
I loved I can't remember which pick it was. And again, you can go to YouTube and watch the Next Pick series, which I'm sure if people are listening to this podcast, they've already seen it. But I love that Ballard's like, this one's mine, and just walks to the board and takes the magnet and is like...
Was that Woods?
It might have been.
Yeah, I think
it was like, yep, this one's mine. I'm taking this pick.
That was him kind of sweating it out,
Right.
With the Woods thing. So, yeah, I did like. I mean, hell, it's gonna be nerve-wracking in there, man. You got to be wanting to trade up and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and the whole we're not done yet.
Yeah,
they're celebrating the one pick. He's like, we're not done.
Which again, I thought they were done. Just given how he typically operates in the draft, but that is the love for Nick Cross there. So rookie minicamp this weekend. Those rookies now mixed in with the vets for the rest of the off-season program. Like I said earlier, they'll hang around for an extra week in mid-June. And the undrafted class, maybe we can get into a little bit more on next week's podcast, but I think there are some intriguing names in there. Certainly a much bigger group than last year, probably 3 times the size. So maybe we touch on that next week.
Real quick before we jump to that, because I had a question, and I guess I could have Googled it, but you are sometimes my NFL Wikipedia. Practice squads, are those still expanded?
It's a good question. I believe so. I don't think we've got an official word on that yet, but I feel like the NFL enjoyed that. And, I mean, I'd like to think, and not to get into a COVID rant, I'd like to think that we're to the point now where it's just like, all right, if you've got COVID, see how well you can play or not. Are you healthy enough? I mean, there's been Colts players that, Danico Autry got knocked out with COVID for a couple weeks, and there's been other guys that I think certainly could have played that very next day. Right. So, I just hope the NFL gets to the point now where it's like, all right, you live with it, you play with it if you can. If not, you're gonna miss a little bit of time. So I don't know if that would impact how you handle the practice squads, but the more the merrier.
Yeah,
I'm good with it. Was it 16? Was that the number?
It jumped to 16. Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be something to keep an eye on because we know the Colts have used that practice squad a whole lot. So. That's a good question.
All right, let's jump into Twitter questions from our listeners around the world, and I enjoy. I enjoyed some of the banter that I got from my Australian accent. Appreciate you
I
guys.
think people were raving about it, right?
It was just fun. I mean, it's nice to
beautiful.
It's nice to have, and we have, like, for instance, Tanner, who has a question here on question 3. It's nice when people start to reach back out. You can feel the football juices are flowing, and we're ready to get back into the
beautiful
season.
community here.
Yes.
Kevin's Corner.
First one's from Logan. Since we drafted 2 tight ends, as we mentioned, Jelani Woods, one of them, and we have 2 tight ends on the roster, does one get cut? If so, who do you think the one who gets cut is? Logan loves a podcast and says, keep on hustling, KB.
Keep hustling, keep grinding, stay grinding. Hashtag. Thank you, Logan. Appreciate that. Boy, I mean, when Jelani Woods was drafted and then Drew Ogletree was drafted in the 6th round, people are like, red flag for Kylan Granson. I don't see it. Maybe a yellowish flag, but I don't even think that. Like, Granson is a different body type than those other guys. You can put Ogletree on the practice squad, man. He's a perfect practice squad,
right.
6th-round pick. Throw him on there to develop, etc. So I really think, Logan, it's going to be Mo Alley, and it's going to be Kylan Granson, it's going to be Jelani Woods, and I don't think there's a whole lot of debate. Now, I don't know. Maybe you've got room for a 4th tight end. To me, it seems a little bit of a luxury. We'll see how things play out with training camp and whatnot, but yeah.
Next one's from Colton. He's concerned with the lack of depth at guard, center, defensive line, and linebacker. Says obviously injuries happen every year and can derail a team, but feels that it could be very ugly. He finds the defensive end interesting. Ben Banogu is only a true defensive end, and we have Kwity Paye and Yannick Ngakoue. He would much rather assign 3 or 4 quality bench players to give us more depth instead of signing James Bradbury or another big name on the market. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think Bradbury is in play. Did we get a question specifically about him?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold off on anything more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree where he's looking a little bit in terms of the depth questions. I would say depth at edge rusher, to your point. Banogu, the only true defensive end. Dayo Dengbo, he's probably best suited as an interior rusher. He can certainly help you out. Tyquan Lewis can help you out. But again, what was the phrase? True defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
They probably aren't exactly that for you. So I do think that's something to monitor. Certainly Kwity Paye and Ngakoue are going to play a whole lot for you. But I do think you are up something there, Colt. I think in general, depth, 6'7" on the O-line, 6, 7, 8 on the D-line, very much up in the air entering camp.
Mentioned Tanner earlier, coming back with a question. He's extremely pleased with how Chris Ballard was able to maneuver throughout the draft, which we discussed a little bit earlier. Also, he genuinely thinks we made the right picks in the right rounds. Given the state of the AFC South, especially after the A.J. Brown trade to Philadelphia, do you think this roster has enough juice to make some noise? And do you see any more moves in the future?
Well, that's a great question. I'll first throw this to you, Chris.
Okay.
Was it noise? Was that the phrase?
Yes.
Used?
Mm-hmm.
Describe that for me. What do you think Tanner means by noise? What is it? Is it multiple playoff wins? Is it get in the dance? Is it win a division?
At this point, for me, noise is you win the division and we are one of the top 4 teams in the playoffs. Which obviously you would be, but
yeah,
that's at this point that we've made noise in the past. I mean, last year you're making noise.
Yeah,
the year
regular
before,
season noise.
You're making noise. Noise to me is getting to the playoffs and winning a playoff game.
Yeah,
and taking it to a brink of potentially going to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think it's so critical for this franchise and the players to feel, what it means to be in the postseason. I know a lot of people bring up the Buffalo game and that playoff game. Chris, there was how many people in the stands for that game? That's just, it was still COVID. It isn't the usual playoff intensity. So, if you are Taylor and Pittman and, to a lesser extent, Nelson and Leonard, who experienced it in their rookie years, some of these core guys, they haven't really felt the playoff atmospheres, intensities that come with it. You guys heard me say this time and time again. Peyton Manning era didn't fall out of bed and make Super Bowl runs. It was a process, playoff experience process with more lows than highs to get to that level. That's typically how it is for most teams. As far as noise, I saw some gambling site the other day. I want to say they had the Colts as I think it was the 5th most likely team to make the playoffs in the NFL, which I thought was interesting. And then I thought about it more, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. They play in a very easy division. Like, if I was going to say to you, Chris, right now, more likely to be the number 1 overall seed in the AFC, Chiefs or Colts, the initial thought would probably be Chiefs. But then you think about it, and you're like, wait, the AFC West is going to beat the hell out of each other.
You're right.
Did I see the stat the Chiefs are the first team in NFL history to have 8 straight games to start a season against teams with winning records from last year?
I didn't see that.
I mean, just brutal. We obviously saw the Colts schedule last year and the 1-4 start with how difficult those 5 games are, and now the Chiefs add a few more onto it. So what I'm getting at is if you rank the AFC teams 1 to 16, I don't put the Colts in the top 5. But when you rank them factoring in their divisions, I've made this analogy before on a morning show. The Colts play in the Big 12, and they're Oklahoma State. And the beauty of it is Oklahoma State was a play away from making the playoffs last year. If the Colts are in the SEC, they would be Ole Miss, or I'd say Auburn. Auburn's kind of fallen off a cliff here, but you know what I'm getting at.
Not Tennessee.
Yes, sorry. That 8-win, SEC team that just, they might pull off the one upset over LSU or
Mississippi
Alabama or
State,
something like that.
someone
sure.
that, right.
So, I to your question, Tanner, if you have a home game in the playoffs, you better be capable of making noise. And I do think the Colts have a great chance of getting a home game in the playoffs. But in terms of last couple standing, I still need to see that all play out.
All right, we got 3 more. This next one's from Thomas. He loves the podcast. Kevin does not miss a single episode, so thank you, Thomas, for that. How does Ben Bandigoud continue to hold onto a roster spot is his main question. Doesn't seem like he can even dress as a third-year player, and he says he just hasn't shown anything. He does not trust him to be his backup or Leo or anything else of the matter.
Yeah, this is, again, kind of a popular thing. I thought, was there a chance you could trade Bandigoud on draft day? Granted, who would want him, I guess. Couple things. Pass rush is coveted, and let's go back to what I said earlier. What does Gus Bradley see? Bandigoud, there was a TCU defensive end, I'm not mistaken, LJ Collier, that went to Seattle, I think the same draft as Bandigoud. There are some skill set things that you're like, all right, he fits kind of what we look for. He's also really cheap. I mean, the same reason why Paris Campbell's still here. I mean, you look at the 15 games that Paris Campbell's played in the NFL, it's pretty nondescript. So I'm not overly concerned about why Bandigoud's still here. The roster's at 90. Look at him in the face and say this, all right, new defensive coordinator, first time in your career that you've had that. Here's Ngakoue, proven guy. Can he, light a fire under your ass, something like that? I'm good with giving him one more chance. I agree with Ballard's thought process at times where sometimes it takes pass rushers a while. To a degree, injuries played into it, but, Toure last year, 5.5 sacks in the contract year. I think he'd go to San Francisco and have 7 or 8 this year. So, yeah, what does Bradley see? Not a lot of money. I mean, I'd be willing to bet if you cut Bandigoud, you'd save like $1.5 million. Not too much there.
Right.
So, but he's got to earn it. He certainly has to earn it because last year he was super expendable.
Yeah.
On the roster and was a healthy scratch a lot.
We teased it a little bit earlier. This next question comes from Latrell. If we sign James Bradberry, wouldn't that mean less time for Kenny Moore on the field?
Yeah, I don't know. First off, I don't think so. I think Kenny Moore is a guy you just don't take off the field. He's an outside corner when you need an outside corner, and if Bradberry and Gilmore are that, I think he would play in slot. Again, is Gilmore a 100-snap guy anymore? 100's a little bit too much. 80-snap, 70-snap guy. He wasn't last year in Carolina, so I think that's still a question you have to ask yourself. I don't think Bradberry meets kind of the Colts running threshold in terms of 40, things like that. And, I think I hit on this last week. You're paying Kenny Moore multi-year money. You're paying Gilmore multi-year money. You're going to pay another corner multi-year money there. So I think that is something to acknowledge as well.
Kevin, the last one comes from Drew. It's a fun one, and since we are in the summer and a lot of you guys will be on vacation, and I'll just use this term analogy because you'll be out at the beach and whatever, a tide's turning. We're going to go from a lot of Andrew Luck questions that are now going to be pushed away. New tide coming in is going to be Arch Manning, and Drew wants to know if the Colts traded back every single year until Arch comes out. Would you have a problem with that?
Give that to me one more time.
If the Colts traded back every single year until Arch Manning comes out in the draft, would you have a problem with that?
Unbelievable. I mean, these are the questions we're about going to get, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, the turning of the tide.
Chap looked at us on Saturday of the draft. He's like, should I tweet it out about Arch? And I'm like, yes, 100%. You got to love Twitter. Twitter's the greatest thing in the world. He tweets it out. Sure enough, I checked it a few days later. He got like 1,000 likes. Something about Arch Manning. I'm like, oh my God, I love it. So what's Arch? He's going to be a high school senior?
He'll be a senior this year, yes.
If Arch's last name was Bowen, where would he be ranked? Like, is Arch really, really, really good? Or is he Arch Manning?
From what I've seen.
Like, is Charlie Woods the best 12-year-old golfer in the world? Or is it, if his last name was Charlie, I was going to say Mickelson. Probably not a good time for Phil, though. You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, I truly do believe, and I know, and I think, me personally, with that weight that he's carried on his shoulders, being a quarterback, same high school, knowing that he's going to be compared to, his uncles and his father,
right,
and also being a multi-sport athlete, he's carried it very well, and his physique and his arm, right now, they would meet my standards. Like, and with the NIL money, I mean, Arch Manning might not even have to play in the NFL. He's going to go get a paycheck in college, and he'll be good to go.
So Drew wants to trade back every draft until Arch comes out. I mean, you could have all the draft capital in the world, but if Arch Manning turns out to be whatever, Peyton Manning 2.0,
they're not giving that pick up.
I don't think the number one overall pick is giving that up.
Right.
No matter who they have. The whole quarterback thing, Colts-wise, it's just kind of fascinating how it all unfolded this offseason to where you are at that point. To your question, Drew, I would have an issue for that. Can you imagine saying that to your team? Yeah, we're going to trade back every year. Quentin Nelson's like, dude, I'm not even going to be here when Arch Manning is playing here. The whole dilemma, did the Colts get lucky with Matt Ryan? Sure. I also think the old phrase of you create your own luck, I think the Colts did they put themselves in a position. Now, some of this is their own doing, a.k.a. not having a long-term quarterback. But financially, they were in a position to where they could absorb a Matt Ryan contract.
Yes.
And Frank Reich has a dynamic around the league. We can debate Frank Reich, quarterback whisper, and all that. But clearly he has a dynamic around the league that guys, I think, want to play for him that are quarterbacks. So I think that played into the Matt Ryan thing. And basically, how I never thought the Colts were in on Jimmy G, and I think that's true. I think the shoulder scares the hell out of him. Baker, if you heard the Colts talk about Carson Wentz, you imagine Baker. Basically, I think, and it was told, this is kind of how it operated. They looked at those QBs this year. Mariota, Winston, Trubisky, Dalton, whoever else I'm missing, throw into that group. And basically it was like, we can't win a division or Super Bowl with any of those dudes. So why jump on one now, sit it out, wait, and hope? How many times in January, February, March, Chris, did I say pray for dominoes?
Right.
Pray for him. Rodgers, Wilson, Watson. Rodgers domino didn't lead to your answer. Wilson domino didn't lead to your answer. But the Watson domino did. And I do think the Colts had interest in Watson. Now, would they have traded him within the division? Would the Irsay family have signed off? That remains to be seen.
Correct.
But just throw that in there. And lastly, again, we're going to be super patient, uber patient with it. And sure enough, it's a little bit of luck. You also put yourself in a position where Matt Ryan, I don't think, is wanting to go to every single place in the NFL. And that is why you're able to end up with him. And Washington continues. I mean, you imagine what Washington's brass must think. Like, you got Matt Ryan for that price, and we had to give you Carson Wentz for that price.
I don't think a lot
Ron
of
Rivera has to be irate.
I don't think a lot of their brass is going to be there much longer.
Well, that's probably a good thing. And maybe at top down, honestly.
Yeah, and that's exactly the top is where it starts. All right, that was Twitter questions. Anything on the rest of the week or anything you want the listeners to know on 1075thefan.com that they can look for?
We had a question from a fan on our morning show about T.Y. Hilton, Nick Foles. Do they have room to do all of that? Yes, they do. It would be tight. I don't expect anything imminent on any of that stuff. I think Hilton's still in play.
Okay.
I don't think Julio's as much in play. I know it's kind of been a debate here locally. I think Nick Foles. You got to remember, Nick Foles has Frank Reich history. He's also got a little bit of Ballard history. Foles had that cup of coffee.
Correct.
In Kansas City there. You could make both work. So I think they'll let the wideouts play out. They'll let Ellinger get a chance to get some reps in the offseason and see how those things go. But I think that's something just to watch. Maybe more July, but the Colts do have room. Not a ton of room.
Wouldn't that be a fun quarterback room?
They got room.
Foles looking at Matt Ryan like, 28-3, I beat Tom Brady.
Oh, shit. Jeez, God. Yeah, Ryan might be like, yeah, about that. we don't need that guy in here. All right, man. That wraps it up. He is Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week. Enjoy the month of May. Weather looks beautiful here in Indianapolis. Hopefully it continues that way through the race. We'll talk to you next week, maybe a little bit later in the week now that I think about it out loud, depending on if we see the first OTA session. So just FYI for anybody out there. But yeah, everybody have a great week. Thanks for listening to Kevin's Corner.
This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.